The Autobiography of C.H. Spurgeon, Chapter 40. First Literary Friends, continued. I have striven with all my might to obtain the position of complete interdependency of all men. I have found at times, if I have been much praised, and if my heart has given way a little, and I have taken notice of it, and felt pleased, that the next time I was censured and abused, I felt the censure and abuse very keenly. For the very fact that I accepted the commendation rendered me more sensitive to the censor, so that I have tried, especially of late, to take no more notice of man's praise than to his blame, but to rest simply upon this truth. I know that I have a pure motive in what I attempt to do. I am conscious that I endeavor to serve God with a single eye to his glory, and therefore it is not for me to take every praise or censure from man, but to stand independently upon the solid rock of right doing. C.H.S. On February the 18th, 1856, just a year after his first article, Mr. James Grant wrote as follows in the Morning Advertiser. When Mr. Spurgeon was preaching in Exeter Hall to the most densely crowded audiences that ever assembled within the walls of the spacious place, we called a special attention to his qualities as a preacher and a theologian. We pointed out freely, but in a spirit of sincere friendship, what we conceived to be his faults both in matter and manner, and expressed not only a hope but a belief that, as he was so young a man, not having then reached his majority, he would, with the lapse of time, which generally matures the judgment, as well as mellows the mind, get rid in a great measure, if not wholly, of what we then specified as defects. It gives us great gratification to say that, having heard him recently in his own chapel, in New Park Street, southward, we discern a decided improvement both as regards his matter and manner. Not that there is any change in Mr. Spurgeon's doctrinal views, or in his mode of illustrating, enforcing, and applying them, but that there is less of the pernicious quality about him when grappling with the views of those from whom he differs. He does not speak so often with the asperity of other preachers of the gospel whom he conceives, and we must say in the main rightly, to be unfaithful to their high calling. There is too a marked and gratifying improvement in Mr. Spurgeon as regards the manner of his pulpit appearances. He was always profoundly earnest in his appeals to the conscience of the unconverted, and spoke with an enthusiasm that showed how deeply he felt when dwelling on the joys and sorrows, the hopes and the fears of believers. And yet, strange to say, there was at times associated with this a seeming irreverency, which we know frequently caused much pain to some of his great friends and admirers. In this respect also, we are happy to say we can discern a decided amendment. Never since the days of George Whitefield has any minister of religion acquired so great a reputation as this Baptist preacher in so short a time. Here is a mere youth, a perfect stripling, only 21 years of age, incomparably the most popular preacher of the day. There is no man within Her Majesty's dominion who could draw such immense audiences, and none who, in his happier efforts, can so completely enthrall the attention and delight the minds of the hearers. Some of his appeals to the conscience, some of his remonstrations with the careless, constitute specimens of a very high order of oracle powers. When this able and eloquent preacher first made his appearance in the horizon on the religious field and dazzled the masses in the metropolises by his brilliancy, we were afraid that he might either get intoxicated by the large draughts of popularity which he had daily to drink, or that he would not be able, owing to a want of variety, to sustain the reputation he had so suddenly acquired. Neither result has happened. Whatever may be his defects, either as a man or a preacher of the gospel, it is due to him to state that he has not been spoiled by popular applause. Constitutionally, he has in him no small amount of self-esteem, but so far from it growing from his daily extending frame, he appears to be more humble and more subdued than when he first burst on our anxious gaze. With regard again to our utter fear that his excellency as a preacher would not be sustained. The evidence has, we rejoice to say, no less agreeably proved the groundlessness of our apprehensions. There is no falling off whatever. On the contrary, he is in some respects improving with the lapse of time. We fancy we can see his striking originality to greater advantage than at first. As a specimen of the early friendly notices in the providential press, the following may be given from the Western Times, February 23, 1856. Another extraordinary preacher. It is a remarkable fact that in the Baptist denomination of Christians in this country, there have sprung up from time to time ministers of extraordinary biblical and other learning, and of great talent and pulpit eloquency. We may refer to Dr. Carey, Dr. Gill, Dr. Ripton, and the distinguished Robert Hall of Bristol, whose discourse Bromham and Canning were glad to listen to, and many others in proof of this particularity. It seems that another light has now sprung up among the Baptists which bids fair to rival, if not to eclipse, the departed luminaries. We mean the Reverend C.H. Spurgeon, who, although but just arrived at 21 years of age, seems in the pulpit and the press to have astonished the religious world. This young Baptist minister preaching created a great sensation in Bristol a short time since, and his visits to other places have excited intense interest. In Glasgow and other parts of Scotland, this gifted young minister has also, with marvelous effect, carried home to the hearts of crowded audiences the saving truths of the everlasting gospel. There is a singularity also about Mr. Spurgeon, for he is emphatically one of the people, and by the gifts and graces with which he is endowed, he shows to the world that the great head of the Church of Christ, as he called his apostles, from the class of humble fishermen when he tabernacled on earth in the flesh, so now that he is in heaven, he continues to call laborers into his vineyard with the working men of polished society. It is not easy to decide whether the following paragraphs from the Freeman, February 27, 1856, should be inserted here or be included in Chapter 38. Readers may be able to settle that point to their own satisfaction. Mr. Spurgeon is unquestionably a phenomenon, a star, a meteor, or at other events something strange and dazzling in the horizon of the religious world. The old lights have gone down, and since Irving and Hall and Chambers fell asleep, there has been no preacher who has created a sensation at all to be compared with the young minister at New Park Street Chapel. We do not let our readers imagine that they have found here a luminous of the same class with those we have just named, whatever Mr. Spurgeon's merits may be, and he has some rare ones. They are of a very different order from those which distinguish the mighty preachers of the last generation. They were all men of gigantic reasoning powers, of refined taste, of prolonged scholarship, and of vast theological learning. Of all these qualities, Mr. Spurgeon has little enough, nor to do him justice does he pretend to any of them, except perhaps in some unlucky moments to the last. But it will probably be agreed by all competent judges that neither Irving nor Hall, nor even Chambers, was so well fitted to carry the gospel to the poor and ignorant as is its modern orator of the pulpit. Their writings will last for many generations and will be as fresh to the latest as they are today. Mr. Spurgeon's sermons will perhaps, footnote, that perhaps just saves the prophet's reputation. Over 100 millions of Mr. Spurgeon's sermons have been already issued, and they are prized beyond measure by an ever-increasing circle of readers. Can this be said of the old lights, Irving and Hall and Chambers? Soon be forgotten, end of the footnote, soon to be forgotten forever, but they go on to the hearts of the multitudes. And as he has the good sense to know the direction in which his talent lies, he promises to be incomparably useful in a class of society where preachers too often complain it is utterly beyond their reach. A lively imagination, sometimes rising to the region of poetry, but more frequently delighting in homely and familiar figures of speech, a free manner of address that goes directly to the understanding of the simplest, and an enthusiastic ardor that must prove catching to all his hearers unless they are more than usually insensible, are the chief legitimate attractions of Mr. Spurgeon's style, and they are qualities so rare in his combination, and are in him so strongly developed as to stamp him, in our judgment, with the decided impress of genius. We should suppose that it must be impossible to hear him without acquiring for him a sentiment of respect, for if offered by his extravagances, as the thoughtful certainly will be, the offense is so immediately atoned for by some genius outburst of feeling that you remember that his extravagances are but the errors of a youth, and that the material on which these excrescences appear is that out of which apostles and martyrs have in every age been fashioned. You pardon his follies, for they are nothing else, for the sake of his unquestionable sincerity and impassioned zeal. You wish it had been possible that a mind so gifted might have received more culture before it was called into its present dangerous position. But finding it as it is, you accept it with gratitude and pray God, the All-Wise, to be its guide and protector. We see in Mr. Spurgeon a soul-loving preacher of Christ's gospel. Few have his particular gifts for arresting the attention of the thoughtless or inspiring the cold with fever. These are high endowments, high but awfully responsible. Of that responsibility we believe too that Mr. Spurgeon has no mean sense, and therefore we hope not without confidence that his usefulness will continually augment and that whatever distracts from it will gradually disappear. A more favorable notice appeared in the Christian Weekly News, March 4, 1856. Great orators, whether pulpit, platform, or centurial, make many friends and many foes. This is inevitable, but it is not our purpose just now to investigate or set forth the reasons for this result. The fact being granted, we are at no loss to account for the applause and contumely, contumely, which has been heaped upon the young minister whose sermons are before us. His appearance and labors in this metropolis have excited in all religious circles, and even beyond them, attention and surprise, if not admiration. Scarcely more than a youth in years, comparatively untutored, and without a name, he enters the greatest city in the world, and almost simultaneously commands audiences larger than have usually listened to her most favored preachers. Almost daily has he occupied pulpits in various parts of town and country, and everywhere been greeted by overflowing congregation. As might be expected, many who have listened to him have gone away to speak ill of his name, while others, and by far the larger number, have been stimulated by his earnestness, instructed by his arguments, and melted by his appeals. We have seen among his hearers ministers of mark of nearly every section of the Christian church, laymen well known in all circles as the supporters of the benevolent and the evangelical institutions of the day, and citizens of renown, from the chief magistrate down to the parish beadle, that the man who causes such a fever must possess some power, not commonly found in men of his profession, will only be doubted by his distractors. Whether that power be physical, intellectual, or moral, or happy blending of them all, is perhaps a question yet not fully decided even in the minds of many of his warmest admirers. The sermons before us would, we think, if carefully examined, help them to a decision. Among the reasons to which, in our opinion, may be attributed the unbounded popularity of our author, we would name his youth, his devotedness, his earnestness, but especially that thrilling eloquency, which can be once open the floodgates of the soul of thousands, forming a Sabbath morning audience within the walls of Exeter Hall. May the Lord continue to hold him as a star in his right hand, and through his instrumentality bring many souls to bow to the scepter of his love and mercy. The list of his first literary friends would not be complete unless it included the Reverend Edwin Paxton Hood, his volume, The Lamps of the Table, which was published in 1856, containing a long and appreciative article on Mr. Spurgeon, in the course of which the writer said, It is not too much to say that this mere lad, the boy preacher, is the most remarkable pulpit celebrity of his day. It must be admired that, amidst all the popularities, there is no popularity like his. Among things, remarkable or not, remarkable according to the reader's ideas, is the treatment of the young preacher by his brethren, shall we say brethren, in the ministry. We understand they have pretty generally agreed to regard him as a black sheep. His character is good, unexceptionable. His doctrines have no dangerous heresy in them. Still he is tabooed. The other day, a very eminent minister, whose portrait we have attempted to sketch in this volume, and whom we certainly regarded as incapable of so much meanness when we were sketching it, perhaps the most eminent of the London dissenting ministers, was invited to open a chapel in the country, at any rate to take the evening service. But he found that Spurgeon was to take the morning, and he smartly refused to mix in the affair. It was pitiable, and we discharged ourselves, as in duty bound, of an immense quantity of pity upon the head of this poor jealous man, who dreaded least the shadow of a revival should fall prematurely over his pulpit. No, usually the ministers have not admired this advent. The tens of thousands of persons who flock to hear the youth preach, his strong, nervous gospel, do not at all conciliate them. Perhaps rather exasperate them. It would be easy to pick up 1,000 criticisms on the preacher. Many, not to say most of them, very severe. He is flattered by a hurricane of acrimonious remark and abuse, and perhaps owes his popularity in no small degree to this sweeping condemnation. One thing is certain, Spurgeon's back is broad, and his skin is thick. We can, we fancy, bear a good deal, and bear a good deal without wincing. Little more than 21 years of age, he is the topic and theme of remark now in every part of England, and severe as some of his castigators were, he returns their castigation frequently with a careless, downright, hearty goodwill. Beyond a doubt, the lad is impudent, very impudent. Where he could not, at such an age, be where he is or what he is. A characteristic mark of the fullness of Mr. Spurgeon's mind, and is an entire abandonment to his subject, is his plunging at once into it from the first paragraph of his sermon. He does not often beat about with prepared exordiums, and yet his exordium is frequently not only very beautifully, but perhaps the most beautiful portion of his discourse. Is it not a rule with the Rhetoricians, with Dr. Whately and others, that the exordium, exordium, should be prepared nearly at the close of the oration, when all the powers of the mind and heart are alive with the subject, so that the auditors might have their attention arrested by those passages which will represent the auditor's most inflamed and pathetic state of feeling. We can very well acquit our speaker of any slavish following of this rule. Probably, he may be ignorant of it, but he is the subject of it. Wrath and possessed by his topics of thought and feeling, he frequently seems to cast over the people the state of mind indulged in him by the last impression of his text. His words often are more calm, beautiful, suggestive, and subduing in his opening than in any of his following remarks. We hear that Mr. Spurgeon has models upon which he forms his mind and style. We think it very doubtful, but at any rate, he does not follow them slavishly. He has in his speech true mental and moral independency. Robert Hall was charged with imitating Robert Robinson of Cambridge. In fact, there was not the slightest resemblance between those two minds. Spurgeon is said to imitate Robert Hall and William J. No doubt he has read them both, but his style is wholly unlike theirs. He perhaps has something of William J.'s plain and method, and that is all. but to Robert Hall there is not the most remote resemblance. He has not the purity, power, nor speed of that inimitable master. He is not at all qualified to shine in the brilliant intellectual firmament in which he held his place. We should give to him a very different location. He has the unbridled and undisciplined fancy of Hervey without its eloquency. But instead of that, the drollery of Burge Ridge and the uniqueness, earnestness of Rolling Hill is his best days. But it is probably that many of us walk far too gingerly in our estimate of public speech. He who determines never to use a word that shall grate harshly on the ears of a refined taste may be certain that he will never be very extensively used. The people love the man who will condescend to their idiom. And the greatest preachers, those who have been the great apostles of the nation, have always condescended to this. Rosette, Hall, Chamber, McCall, were the doors of the pulpit. At their feet sat the refinement, the scholarship, the politeness of their times. But such men as Luther and Latimer, St. Clara and Knox, Whitfield and Christmas Evans, such men have always seized on the prevailing dialect and made it tell with immense power on their auditors. A question repeatedly asked by many persons when they have either heard or heard of this young man is, will he last? Will he wear? To which we have always replied, why not? There is apparently no strain in the production of these discourses. They bear every appearance of being, on the whole, spontaneous talkings. The preacher speaks from the full and overflowing spring within him, and speaks, as we have said many times during the week. Some of his great sermons are characteristic by great mental poverty, some, and most, by a great mental wealth. So is it with all preachers, even those who consume the midnight oil, and make it their boast that they can only produce one sermon a week. Our preacher's fullness and readiness is, to our mind, a guarantee that he will wear and not wear out. His present amazing popularity will, of course, subside, but he will still be amazingly followed. And what he is now, we prophesy, he will, on the whole, remain. For polished diction, we shall not look to him. For the long and stately argument, we shall not look to him. For the original and profound thought, we shall not look to him. For the clear and lucid criticism, we shall not look to him. But for bold and convincing statements of evangelical truth, for a faithful grasping with convictions, for happy and pertinent illustrations, for graphic description, and for searching common sense, we shall look, and we believe we shall seldom look in vain. In a word, he preaches not to metaphysicians or logical, neither to poets nor to savans, to masters of directions or masters of rhetoric. He preaches to men. This chapter may be fitly closed with extracts from a pamphlet entitled Why So Popular? An Hour with Reverend C.H. Spurgeon, a Doctor of Divinity. It caused a great stir in the religious world when it appeared, and there is special appropriateness in the poetic conclusion now that the beloved preacher, as a star, has melted into the light of heaven. The writer, addressing his remarks personally to Mr. Spurgeon, says, "Your ministry has obtained the dignity of a moral phenomenon. You stand on an eminence which, since the days of Whitfield, no minister, with single exception, if indeed there be one, of any church in this realm has attained. You have access to a larger audience than the magic of any other name can gather. You have raised the church from obscurity to eminency. Perhaps I might add, rumor is my authority, from spiritual diligence to affluence. You entered on a sphere where to used the mildest word, languor, held unbroken Sabbath, and in less than 3 short years, you have instrumentally gathered a large, united, zealous, energetic church, second in numbers, in burning zeal, and in active effort to no other church in the metropolis. Nor has God given you favor with your own people alone, blessed with a vigorous mind and with great physical energy. You have consecrated all to your Master's service, and hence you have become an untiring evangelist. East, west, north, south, in England, Wales, and Scotland, your preaching is appreciated by the people and have been blessed of God. No place has been large enough to receive the crowds who flock to hear the young Whitfield. And on many occasions you have preached the glorious gospel, the sword of the green earth being the floor on which, and the vault of the blue heaven the canopy under which, you announce to uncounted thousands all the words of this life. Your name has thus become familiar as a household word in most of the churches and many of the families in our land, of the land, and the young pastor of Southwark has taken his place among the celebrities of our land, and among the ecclesiastical portion of these, he is higher than the highest. On another and much higher ground, I would offer my congratulations, usefulness in the law of the moral universe, that in relation to the Christian ministry means the moral renovation, the saving conversion of human souls. Nothing short of this can satisfy the desires of any godly minister of Christ's gospel, and therefore all such will estimate the amount of their success by the number of well-sustained instances of conversion, which are the fruit, under God's blessing, of their ministerial labors. Subjected to this test, the ministry of him to whom my congratulations are now presented is placed above all the ministries with which I have any acquaintancy or of which I possess any authentic information. He states, so I am informed, that more than 1,000 souls have been hopefully converted to God during the past year by the instrumentality of his ministry, and that, as the result of his metropolitan and provincial labors during the period of his short but successful pastorate, several thousands who have erred from the truth or never known it have been raised or restored to holiness, happiness, and God. This is the Lord's doing. It is marvelous in our eyes. I know something of the state of religion in our British churches, and I do not hesitate to avow my belief that among the thousands, and happily their name is legend, he who now proclaim the fundamental varieties of the Christian revelation, there is not one who can truthfully say, as we can say, that during the 3 short years, thousands, as the fruit of his ministry, have been added to the fellowship of his own church and other churches. I am fully aware that if I asked yourself the question, why so popular and why so useful, you would reply in a self-humbling, God-exalting spirit, I am nothing, God is all, and to his sovereign I ascribe all my popularity and all my success. While admiring the spirit of this declaration, I decline to accept it as an answer to my question. God is a sovereign, and in his sovereignty, essential to his Godhead, he has a right to give his spirit when, where, to whom, and in what proportion he pleases. But he has no caprice, no senseless, reasonless arbitrariness in his administration. He never acts without reason, though in his sovereign right he often withholds from his creature, man, the reasons which influence the divine mind. This, and not caprice, is God's sovereignty. If I cannot discover the secret of your popularity in what you preach, can I find it in any peculiarity in your mode of preaching? How is, in my judgment, the explanation of the secret? You have strong faith, and as the result, intense earnestness. In this lies, all as in the hair of Samson, the secret of your power. Go on, my brother, and may God give you a still larger amount of ministerial success. Preach the word, the old theology, that glorious gospel of the blessed God, for which apostles labored and martyrs died. And all your teachings continue to exhibit the cross of Christ as occupying in the Christian revelation like the sun in our planetary system, the very center, and imparting to all their light and heat. Tell the people that every doctrine, duty, or promise of the Scriptures stands intimately connected with the cross, and from that connection derives its meaning and value to us, thus exhibiting the whole system of divine truth in its harmony and symmetry, judging even by your own antecedents what a glorious prospect of honor, happiness, and useful presence presents itself to your view. A star in the churches, a star of no mean magnitude, of no ordinary brilliancy. You may be honored to diffuse very luminously the derived glories you possess, and having run your appointed course, ultimately set, but far distant be the day, as sets the morning star, which falls not down behind the darkened west, nor hides obscured amidst the tempest of the sky, but melts away into the light of heaven. And B, Mr. Spurgeon's autobiographical narrative is resumed in the following chapter. This ends chapter 40, having been read by Peter John Parisi, also known as Brian Dean. None of my audios are copyrighted. Please feel free to make as many copies as you desire to the glory of God.